The big story right now, we'll jump right into it, is we have this from the Daily Mail. This is a PsyOp run by the FBI on the American people. Twitter Files author Michael Schellenberger says FBI knew Hunter laptop was real, but still told Twitter and the U.S. public it was fake. Ultimately, what we ended up seeing from the latest Twitter Files is that not only was the FBI paying Twitter money so that they could run censorship operations, but that Yoel Roth, I believe it was Yoel Roth, wrote an email saying, basically what happened, it seems, is that someone hacked into Hunter's laptop, downloaded the contents, cloned the machine, and then dropped it off at this computer repair shop in a Russian disinformation campaign or something. I love that narrative because it is the most insane conspiracy theory I've ever heard. And they call us the conspiracy theorists for saying that the FBI was running a PsyOp and manipulating the interfering in the election and all that stuff. But now here we are with definitive proof because Elon Musk bought Twitter and released all this stuff. We now know the FBI knew the story was real, lied to big tech, lied to us, and I guess definitively interfered in the election.
Well, I think it's kind of hard when they call the story disinformation, even from what Yoel Roth was saying, is that if it was cloned and then put on a new device and then left somewhere, that would still have meant that the information was real. I heard leftists at the time saying, no, this is completely fake. It's not even real information. So we had so many different narratives, all of which were leading to it's not real, don't worry about it. And I'm just wondering, is the FBI or individuals within the FBI, are they ever going to be held accountable? Because at this point, since Trump, we saw that they were essentially acting like this pseudo fourth arm of government, doing whatever they wanted, trying to interfere with American politics. When does the accountability happen?
When has accountability happened?
It's a good point. A depressing point, but...
Yeah, man, I think we got to stop calling it, by the way, big tech censorship. I've been saying this for a long time. It is government tech censorship, which is to say it is just government censorship disguised in the veneer of private sector activity. I wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal in January, about 2 years ago, January 2021. And at that time, with far less evidence, to me, it was already obvious, right? This was the government doing through the back door what they couldn't get done through the front door under the Constitution. To me, if you see the pieces already put on the chessboard, you've got threats already being issued. You've got inducements already being issued. And this isn't just inducements by the FBI or the administrative class. This is hardwired in the law, right? Not a lot of people know this. You have a Section 230, Section 2, literally says, okay, if it is constitutionally protected content, you can still take it down and not be liable under state law. And by the way, if you want to actually be an extra cherry on top, we're going to threaten you, that we're going to break you up. We're going to, regulate you, call for your breakup or whatever it is. And so why is it surprising that the executive branch of the government is just executing on the threats that they made starting 2 years ago? So we need to stop being surprised by this and just recognize it for what it is. Yep. This isn't some sort of collusion. It's just the reality of directed government censorship. The only difference is Vladimir Putin will tell you through the front door that he's actually saying what can and can't be said on the internet. Here we abide by a fiction that says that no, these are actually just private companies that we're going to have do it instead. But it's the same side of the story on two different sides of the Atlantic.
It's an illusion. It's a lie. It's partly a bigger psyop that I think finally is being exposed here because, you've been saying it. I've been saying it since 2008, 2009, saying, hey, the intelligence agencies have a lot of control over the corporate media. It's only a matter of time until they have their influence with social media. And I think throughout the last few years, we have seen them act in very coordinated ways. We have seen all the companies on a dime turn and make the same decision at one time. That's not an accident. It didn't happen because they all decided to come together and do what's not good for them, destroy their business, destroy the ability of what made them great, and that's people being able to debate and to talk to each other. They went against their own principles, their own things that were good for them, and then obeyed the government, because as you said, the government was threatening them from the very beginning, and it's only because they were there calling the shots why we can't have free speech online.
And to be clear, this is not a new phenomenon. I mean, even back when we had print journalism or just televised journalism, you had people like Anderson Cooper who've essentially been to Fed camp, right? So essentially all they did was pivot to traditional media to digital media. So, as shocked as, well, we shouldn't be shocked. Like you said, we saw the signs, but as surprised as some people are, this goes back even further than a lot of people
Especially
realize.
when it comes to the church commissions, and when we found out that the CIA had officials at the top branches of all the corporate media outlets. And Mr. Van Vanderbilt, Anderson Cooper, as some people call him, did also train to be a CIA agent. Coincidentally, I had a couple conversations with him about that 3 times. He didn't like me bringing that up.
I was there.
Yeah.
Luke runs up to Anderson Cooper and he's like, what did you ask him? Why did you leave the CIA or something like that?
I was like, can you tell us about your training at the CIA? What happened here? And what about that saying, once
mad.
you're CIA, you're always CIA? Can we discuss the influence of the intel agencies leaking fake stories to the corporate media that always regurgitates them? And whether it's the WMDs, the banker bailouts, they are in lockstep and barrel when it comes to pushing out the bigger lies of course, the government, of the intel communities. They've always been doing it, and we have always been sold a bag of goods that were lies based off a bigger agenda that they've been pushing.
I've heard activists call Facebook Face CIA Book. Face CIA Book.
Fed
right?
Book is also a good one.
And we were talking about this yesterday on the show, that I think it was Bannon mentioning that these organizations, these big tech, they were built with government subsidy and assistance, and they intended to use them this way. So I'm wondering, for you, Vivek, or whatever you guys' thoughts are, like, do you think the inception of these things, when you mentioned that Section 230 has that provision, Section 2, I think you said it was, that allows them to remove constitutionally protected speech. Do you think that these things were built in mind to do an end run around the Constitution?
Yeah, so I don't think you need to have the facts of them actually having been in the same room with the same venture capital investment on the cap table of the company for the entire conspiracy to still hold intact, okay? It was at least softly designed that way, okay? So this is I actually want to go into the specifics of this law a little bit, because people actually mix up the 2 parts of Section 230 all the time. There's the part that everybody knows, which is that, okay, these platforms aren't liable for what does and doesn't show up. That's Section 230C1. Section 230C2 is probably one of the most remarkable statutes that most Americans are not aware of, which specifically was a statutory workaround for the Constitution. So never have I seen a statute where you say that there's no liability for taking down such material, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected. It was explicitly designed to allow the government, the federal government, to protect private companies to take down content that the federal government otherwise couldn't take down. So I think that in a certain sense, the traps were already laid to say that the federal government wants to make sure it has the latitude to take down content that the First Amendment otherwise would protect. It needed to induce private companies to do it. And there's a great example. You'll actually like this one, relating to an issue that doesn't relate to free speech, where the federal government wanted to do the same thing with the war on drugs. Okay, so they wanted to say, okay, we want to get drugs off the street. We're in a war on drugs, but we can't directly search passengers on railroads or whatever directly. So what did they do? They passed a law that said that any railroad company, private company, is immunized from liability. They can't be sued if the railroad company searches the passengers on board for drugs. Wow. We're not doing it. It's just a private company doing it. So guess what? Now, thankfully, we have a Supreme Court in this country, which is the one branch of government that I think we can still, at least if we're going to have to pick one that has its integrity still intact, it's the judicial system, said that not so fast. If you're going to use a federal law to do through the back door what the government couldn't do through the front door because of the Fourth Amendment in this case, that's still state action, and we're going to treat it as such.
Right.
And so the railroad companies are bound by the Fourth Amendment. That's effectively what's going on with these technology companies. So whether or not it was certain of these companies, Palantir and others, were definitely funded by the government at inception. Others may not have been directly funded, but that detail matters less than the truth of what comes out of it is functionally these may as well have been arms of the government. That's what we're learning.
Yeah, the latest story today is that we're finding out that the FBI was giving Twitter $3.4 million as a thank you for allowing them to, of course, spy and kind of manipulate the whole platform. That's chump change. That's not a lot of money when we're talking about these big companies. But when you look at the start of a lot of them, especially Facebook with In-Q-Tel, when you look at the grants that were given to Alphabet and Google, when you look at the government research and data, especially when it came to satellite imagery that was given to Google Maps, they were able to have an advantage that no one else in the market was able to have because of their connections to government. And I think they took an oath saying, hey, we're going to be serving the government. We're going to be doing everything the government wants if the government gives us all these tax incentives, all these grants, all this information. And I think that's the deal that they made with the devil to destroy any kind of legitimate competition, making them the current monopolies that they are now, who are kind of undefeatable. You look at Alphabet, you look at Google. Who's going to be competing them in the market? We can't compete with them because of the unfair advantage that the government gave them from the beginning.
Right. So the question is, what do we do now? Right. I mean, I've seen people say, oh, well, in order to break them up, that in and of itself is just more government intervention. So what's the answer going
Take
forward?
away all their tax incentives, take away all their grants, get all their money back. That would be a start for me, from my point of view. But more essentially, spread awareness. Make people aware, like, hey, your tax dollars paid for this. Let's get all that tax money back. Let's also allow the free market to speak. Let's also try to allow competitors to be out there. Let's also not intervene and regulate the market so much as it is to make it almost impossible for anyone. Because the person that loves regulations the most is usually the head of industries who get to use it in order to destroy their competitors.
Right. So I agree with a lot of that. But the thing is, we've seen what big tech does to its competitors. So even if we say, all right, you have no more tax breaks, none of these leg up policies that the government has been giving you, what do we do when all of these servers decide to kick off a free speech platform, right? Because we see that they're already big enough, they're able to act as a cartel.
Yeah, and they do. They act like a cartel.
State action doctrine, okay? If it's state action in disguise, the Constitution still applies. There's a First Amendment in this country. It's a really pesky thing that says that if you're the government, it's an inconvenience. You can't tell people what you can and can't say. So what's the government doing? They found a workaround. Take the Alex Berenson case or whatever. And by the way, I love this example because it is literally what the founding fathers would roll over in their graves if they actually knew what was going on. Where the First Amendment is designed to do one thing. It is to allow citizens to criticize the government. So you take a government critic, what the government does is they want to silence government critics. They can't do it directly, so they call in the officials from Twitter and say that here's this individual by name, Alex Berenson in this case, whatever, it doesn't matter who it is. Why aren't you taking him down? Why aren't you censoring him? We know from their private Slack message channels internally at the company that they felt that pressure and they did it. Well, guess what? It's a really simple solution. If you are working hand in glove with the government, if you are protected by Section 230C2, which you can make an opt-in statute, if you're responding to threats, then you're bound by the same standards as the federal government. Full stop. These companies ought to be bound by the First Amendment. Full stop.
But it's not just. I just want to go back to the Hunter Biden story just to connect this all together.
Let me address this. Put a pin in it. We've seen lawsuits. Mm-hmm. The judges don't care.
So I actually think that. So I don't think all of these cases have been argued nearly as well as they should. Some have been argued in the Ninth Circuit, which is out in California. When you see these cases brought in the Fifth Circuit, okay, which I think the judges in the Appellate Circuit and the Fifth Circuit, I'd like to see Judge Ho in the Fifth Circuit take one of these cases. Clarence Thomas has already sent smoke signals saying that actually this is a viable theory all the way up to and including the Supreme Court actually potentially hearing these cases. So I don't think it's actually been tested in the right way yet. And the facts just keep getting better and better. I mean, the whole reason why these cases fail is what is the nexus of control that the government exercises? Some of the ones that have been brought have been super, on the weaker side where it's some state that made a request and then the company complied. That would be the case I would bring, all right? Pick the case where there's White House officials that specifically call in the company, specifically name a specific critic, individual critic, by first and last name, tell them to censor it. Then you have the evidence of the company officials going back and forth saying that they felt that pressure. Now you've got the payments, no better inducement than money to get a private party to do what you want them to do. Then you combine them with the threats, and now it's not just some health department, it's the FBI, the guys who wield the guns. That's a stronger case. And so I think that, we got a lot of people got overeager before the evidence actually presented itself. I think that picture's already changed.
And I want to add to your point, it's not just picking out individuals and censoring them. They got so drunk on power, they have orchestrated a vast censorship operation, false flag with the Hunter Biden laptop story, that literally, the laptop, they knew, they had it in their possessions December 9th, 2019. When they had it, they knew it implicated Joe Biden. It made him look bad. They knew an election was coming up, so they lied about it. They called it a Russian hack. They orchestrated a vast conspiracy in order to get the media, because they knew Rudy Giuliani was getting that laptop too. They knew it was coming out. So they orchestrated a PsyOp in order to, of course, make sure that the story was dead on arrival. And then when it came out, it was censored everywhere. And as we know, it also impacted the election very severely, with many people believing that it helped Joe Biden win the presidency, according to many polls out there. That right there is
and then
more
you can't
than just...
even talk about that.
And you can't even talk about that. Exactly. And major news organizations, the New York Post, one of the biggest newspapers, one of the longest running newspapers in the history of America, was censored, wasn't allowed a voice, was taken off social media platforms, was taken off public landscapes for even being able to discuss what happened here. That right there is far more of an atrocious criminal act, in my opinion, than just picking out individuals and censoring them.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.